Welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining us for this Philosophy and Theology joint subject webinar. My name is Catriona and I'm the School Liaison Officer at Downing College, and I'm going to be hosting today's webinar. So why are we running this webinar? Well, hopefully you're interested in studying either philosophy or theology at Cambridge, and you're interested in hearing more about what it's like studying that at Downing and at Cambridge. And we've got lots of people here to help you make that decision. And we're hoping that after this webinar, lots of you will be interested in coming to study at the University of Cambridge. So what have we got for today then? First of all, we're going to be handing over to our admissions tutor, Dr. Cameron Eyeons, and he's going to be going over the admissions process and what you need to do if you'd like to apply to study philosophy or theology at Cambridge. Then I'm going to be handing over to the Director of the Studies. So I'm going to be handing over to Dr. Alessio Santoro as the Director of Studies for Philosophy. And then I'm going to be handing over to Revd Dr Keith Eyeons for Theology, and he's the Director of Studies for Theology. And then finally, we're going to hear from some students about what it's really like to be a student at Downing and Cambridge studying. So we've got Jay, who is studying philosophy at Downing, and then Tillie, who's studying theology. So a few things, sort of housekeeping to remember. This session is being recorded and we will put it on YouTube in the next few days for you to watch back. We're going to try and answer as many questions as we possibly can, and you'll see a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So if you've got any questions for any of the speakers, please use that box and we will ask the questions in the Q&A after all the speakers have finished their presentations. So what is Downing College then? Here's a picture of our site in the centre of Cambridge, and we're one of the 31 Cambridge colleges that make up the University of Cambridge. Some of you may have been to visit us before. And we were founded in 1800 by Sir George Downing. And we were the 17th college to be founded at the University of Cambridge. And we have around 450 students at the college, undergraduate students that is, and we have around 120 new students joining Downing each year. And we take students for any of the subjects taught at the University of Cambridge, but importantly for today, philosophy and theology. So I'm now going to hand over to our admissions tutor, who's going to talk over the admissions process.
Thanks, Catriona, for that. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cameron Eyeons. I'm the admissions tutor at Downing College, and I'm also a fellow at the College for Chemical Engineering. So in my talk this afternoon, what I'd like to try and cover in the slides I'm going to present shortly is talk a little bit about the role of the departments and colleges. So one of the things I found when I first came to Cambridge was I didn't quite understand what the purpose of a college is, and how does that work in sort of synchronization with what departments offer in terms of a service for students. So talk a little bit about what departments' roles are and how colleges work in synergy with those. And then I'll be moving on to talk a little bit about the admissions process, to really highlight the key steps that you need to be aware of when preparing your application for the University of Cambridge. And then I'm going to move on to talk a little bit about admissions assessments and talk about what happens at an interview, and also be able to give you some advice about what to do when preparing your personal statements. So about the university, when you actually join the university as a student, you're a member of the university. So you are part of a department as well as a member of a college. So what actually happens, what does that mean? So in terms of what the department offers, so the department is there to provide you the course material. They set the content for the course syllabus. They provide all the lectures, seminars, practicals, or project work that you would do in the departments. They're also there to assess and examine you, and actually at the end of your degree, award your degree classifications to you. And as well as that, they're there to provide help and advice for what opportunities you may have after you graduate in terms of careers and so forth. So that's what the departments are there for, and that's what they provide in terms of content for students for their learning experience at Cambridge. And how does the college work in sort of synergy with that? Well, the colleges work by complementing that by actually being responsible, first of all, for the selection and administration of students. So when you actually apply to the university, your application actually gets received and reviewed by a college that you've applied to. If you've made an open application, your application is then randomly allocated to a college. So the college is there to, first of all, review the application and select a candidate from those pool of applicants that apply to the college for a place to come and study at the university. As well as that, once the student's been admitted to the college is there to provide academic and pastoral care. So what do I mean when I say that? So when you actually first arrive at Cambridge, the very first thing you will notice is that you've been assigned a Director of Studies. And what the Director of Studies is there for is to provide support, academic support and advice, and basically there to act as a mentor throughout your time while you're studying as an undergraduate. They're there to make sure that you're going on track with your academic work, and actually there to support you if you're falling behind with any of your academic studies, and make sure that they can support you through that. As well as a Director of Studies, once you arrive at college, you'll notice that you are appointed a personal tutor. And they're there really as in the pastoral capacity. So they're there to provide support and assistance to students for a number of scenarios which are non-academic related. For example, once you arrive at the university, you may actually experience some financial unforeseen hardship. A personal tutor is there to advise and guide you through that, and to be able to point you in the right directions about any financial support that's available at the university. In many cases, the tutor will be able to make the case for financial support for you. Another example of where a tutor can be very helpful and useful is if you've had a family bereavement or any kind of extenuating circumstances which has had an impact on your studies while you're studying at the university. A tutor's there to support you through that, and also there to make a case for you if there needs to be any kind of examination allowance or an allowance made for submission of written work, assessed work for the student at the department. As well as a tutor, every college has a college nurse, and they're there again to provide sort of medical help and support and advice for students. And as well as that, every college has a chaplain, which is there to provide, again, more sort of support for the student community. As well as providing all the academic and pastoral care, the college also is responsible for providing all the accommodation for students. So what you will notice that if you go on all the college website, a number of the colleges provide accommodation for students and actually guarantee the accommodation for the first 3 years of your studies. As well as the accommodation, all colleges will have dining facilities and recreation facilities. And if you go on any college website, you'll find a whole host of different types of spaces for students in the college grounds, which are available for students to use for dining, for sports, for recreation, and all sorts of those things. Apart from all the sort of accommodation and sort of infrastructure which is available in the college also makes sure that there are small group teaching organized for students. When I say this is quite unique to Cambridge and Oxford, where students are given supervisions. And these small group teachings are where you get together with an academic who actually goes over your work with you that you've been covering so far in the department, and make sure that they can actually help and guide you through what you've understood from the lecture course, and also fill in the gaps where your understanding of what you've been taught so far in the department is kind of is missing there. So make sure they can bridge through any kind of concepts or work that you've been doing that you needed some help with. So small group teachings are typically sort of 2 to 3 students, and in some cases, individual students meeting up with academics to go over academic work. And again, that's something which we'll be doing on a regular basis throughout the term whilst you're studying as a student at the university. And then finally, the college also provides a range of facilities for academic studies, from access to a library, to access to quiet teaching spaces, IT facilities, which are all kind of provided throughout the college. So that's the kind of hopefully gives you an idea of what a role of a department is, and what a role of a college is, and what sort of facilities and services they can provide for students. So what I want to do now is move on and talk a little bit more about the application process. So there's a number of key steps that needs to be considered when preparing your application to the university. The first thing I always advise students is to spend a bit of time to think about the course that they want to study at higher level, at higher education, at university. There are a number of different courses offered at Cambridge. I think there's over 31 courses which are on offer, which cover a broad range of subjects, which are over 65 different subject ranges. So it's important to think about what subject you want to study and what is it that you're interested about that subject. So I always advise students, spend a bit of time, look up the university website, go and look at the resources available online to read up about the course that you're interested in, to really make sure this is really what you're interested in studying at higher education. Once you've kind of made your mind up about the course you want to study, then there's the next step is when you're preparing your applications to think about which college you want to apply to. Now, a number of students ask me what are the key things they should think about when selecting a college. And my advice to anyone preparing their application to the university is to have your own criteria of what you would like your college to provide for you. So it could be location, it could be the sports facilities at the college, it could be the quality of the accommodation provided by the college, it could be the food that's catered for at the college. It's really your choice. Whatever the criteria is important for you, use that as your sort of selection process for picking the college that you want to apply to. A number of students always ask me, do I need to think about a college which has had lots of applicants compared to a college which has had a few applicants applying for that subject? I really advise against that. Choose the college that you want to apply to because you think that place is a good fit for you and you want to come and study and live at that college. Don't let these sort of statistics guide which college you apply to. At the end of the day, even though a certain application is received by a college, that college will be reviewing that application and comparing it against the gathered field, which is applied to the university. And there is a process known as a winter pool where we actually then review applicants which apply to other colleges to make sure the best candidate gets a place offered at a college independent to where they've applied to. So always pick the college that you're interested in and don't let any of these sort of statistics guide your decision. The other thing I'd always advise someone who's preparing their application is to check any kind of admissions assessment test registration dates. Now, all of you who've joined this webinar today are interested in applying to either philosophy or theology, in which case the assessment is actually an at-interview assessment. This year, we've had to run these assessments online, and there will be further information published about what format these will be taking in the next coming round in due course over the summer. So do keep an eye out of what's being published and told on the university website about these interview assessments. The other thing to think about is the UCAS application deadline. This is much earlier than the application deadline for other universities, and you need to make sure your application is submitted by the 15th of October. If you miss this deadline, your application will not be considered by the university. So please do make sure that you submit your application in advance of that deadline. Again, if you're not sure about any of these deadlines or application processes, please do talk to your schools. The schools will be able to advise you and guide you through this process. And if you can't get the information you need from your school, get in touch with the college you're thinking of applying to, and they should be able to help you and guide you through any questions that you may have. Now, once you've submitted your application to the university will get in touch to ask you to complete an additional questionnaire. Now, at this point, many students get quite stressed about this. I think this is another form of the assessment for their application. Please let me reassure you, this is us trying to gather more information about you so that we have all the information we need to hand when we're reviewing your application. To give you an example of the type of things that we ask for in this additional questionnaire, we'll be asking you what kind of subjects you've covered as part of your A-level course so far. And that's really to make sure that the interviewer has to hand information about what content you have already studied at school. And therefore, when they ask an interview question, they know how to base their interview question based on previous knowledge you already gained through your studies so far. Another example of these additional questionnaires is that if there are any extenuating circumstances which have had an impact on your academic studies so far, there's an opportunity for you to be able to write down and explain those extenuating circumstances in his additional questionnaire, so that can be considered as part of your application as well. Finally, as part of the admissions process, many subjects ask for submitted written work. And again, if there is a requirement from the college that you apply to for submitted written work for philosophy or theology, they will be getting in touch with you to ask you to submit any written work that's needed. So the college will be in touch and liaising with you quite closely to provide you all the information you need for that as well. Once you have submitted all the information that we need, we will then be reviewing your application. And then in early December, we get in touch with all the candidates that we have shortlisted for an interview. And the interviews normally take place in the first 2 weeks of December, and candidates are told by the end of November whether they're going to be invited for an interview in most cases. Once the interviews have taken place, we will then be doing our shortlistings and making any announcements about our decisions and outcomes from applications in early January to applicants. So hopefully this gives you a broad overview of the steps involved in preparing your application to the university, as well as the timelines involved in when the application is received and reviewed and decisions are published. So what information do we use to assess your application? There's a number of things that we look through when we're reviewing an application. We look at your academic record so far, your track record, how well you've done so far academically. We'll be reading through your personal statement. We'll be looking at the reference from your teachers. If you are sitting any tests as part of your application, we'll be reviewing how you performed in those tests. If you have submitted any written work as part of your application, we'll be reading through all those essays that you submitted to make a judgment about your ability and your writing skills and so forth. If there are any extenuating circumstances which have impacted your studies, we will be looking at any information you provide on that as well as part of our review process. And finally, we'll be also looking at how you performed at an interview. Now, no, I need to emphasize this. I really need to emphasize this point. We don't use any one particular criteria here as our deciding factor. We look at all of these criteria and come to a decision about an applicant's application after reviewing everything here. So it's a holistic process where we take into consideration all of these different criteria here before we make a decision about an applicant's application form to the university. So what are we looking for when we are reviewing applications? This is one thing which I can't emphasize enough. We are interested in finding candidates which have high academic ability and potential. Basically, we want to make sure that we admit students that are going to be able to keep up with the course content, have a genuine interest in the subject area, and will do academically well. Cambridge's, the academic studies at the university are quite intense. Terms are very short, they're 8-week long, they're very intense, and we need to make sure that candidates which are selected to come and study at the university can keep up with the pace of the work that students have to, that we demand from students when they're studying at the university. So one of the key things is we make sure that you are suitable for the course, as well as meeting the subject requirements as well. So the other thing is, a lot of people think that, your background is quite important. Again, that has no relevance to your application. Any kind of extracurricular activities you're doing has no relevance to your application. So if you play for, this is my classic one-liner I say to all applicants, if you're playing for the under-18 football team, that's great, and you should definitely pursue your hobbies and your interests, but that would have no relevance to your application to the university. As well as your school, which you've applied for, has no relevance. We are purely judging you on academic ability and potential. So in terms of a standard conditional offer for philosophy and theology, we at Downing, we look for students who are doing 3 A levels as a minimum and have to be achieving an A star and 2 A's. There's no subject requirement for these subjects. However, we want to make sure that students which apply for these subjects are doing academic subjects at A level. As well as that, if you are doing IB, we would expect you to be achieving an overall score of 41 to 43, with your high level subjects getting a grade in 776 in your high level subjects. If you are doing some other type of qualification, There is a lot of information available on the website, and you can find out about the entry requirements based on the qualifications you're studying. However, if after looking through the university website you're still unsure, please do get in touch with the college that you're thinking of applying to, and they should be able to advise you on this. The other thing I would strongly advise all applicants to do is to check the entry requirements for the subject that you're interested in for the college you're applying to, because most colleges have the same entry requirements, but some may have some specific requirements which other colleges don't have. So do make sure that whichever college you choose to apply to, you meet their entry requirements when submitting your application there. So as part of your application, submitting a personal statement is very important. It's usually about 500 to 600 words long, and it's really a chance for you to tell the university of why you would like to read that subject at higher education level. Why are you interested in pursuing that subject at university level? The key things we want to try and see when we're reading through your personal statement is your academic ability and potential. We want to see how motivated you are and how suitable you are for the course, and really see, are there any sort of examples which can demonstrate your commitment and self-discipline for that subject area. So really, it's an opportunity for you to talk about yourself and to be able to present to us why is it that you're interested in studying that subject. And my advice to anyone preparing their application is to find out more about what the subject you're interested in. There's a huge amount of resources available online, and I would definitely recommend everyone who is interested in pursuing their degree is to read up around their subject area and look at literature which is available online to look through. These are just some examples of the types of literature which are available, and I would definitely recommend that you do this. What this actually does is help you broaden your knowledge around the subject area and be able to put into context what you've learning at school so far and how that applies to in context in the broader area of the subject area you're interested in pursuing at higher education. So a successful personal statement, if I was to try and summarize it, is one which is specific in evidence and examples of areas of interest and achievements. Shows that you have thought about and researched the course beyond your school curriculum. And basically a good personal statement generally focuses mainly on 2/3 of it based around academic content and maybe 1/3 around your personal interests and hobbies. It's really an opportunity for you to talk about why you want to study your subject at higher education. And to just kind of put it in more context, I mean, it's good to talk about what has fascinated you and has drawn you to the subject you want to apply to, and to give 1 or 2 good examples of what was the key deciding point for you to choose the subject you wanted to pursue at higher education. A lot of candidates tend to talk a lot about all the literature they've read around their subject area, and sometimes they put down in the personal statement a list of different books that they've read or articles that they've read, which is great to see that you have really researched your subject area. However, it would be far more useful if you picked one of those bits of literature that you've read about and talked about what you've understood from it and how that's led to you making a decision about pursuing that higher education. It's really, we want to see how you've actually taken what you've read and actually interpreted it and then come up with a justification of what has led to your interest development in that area. So the admissions assessment. Now, as I mentioned earlier on in the talk, for philosophy and for theology, there's an at-interview assessment, which typically means that when you do come for an interview, normally during the interview, the day when you're here for your interview, you will be having an at-interview assessment, either at the faculty or at the college. Now, this year, when we did admissions, everything was online, obviously due to the pandemic. However, since that, we have been looking at reviewing our processes, and so there will be some more information published about the at-interview assessments. Likelihood is there's going to be two formats. Either if you are coming for an interview in person to the college, you will be having your assessment then. If not, there will be an assessment which will be organized online for you to do pre your interview date before you arrive for your interview. In both cases, There is a lot of information available online on how to prepare for your at-interview assessment, and some examples of some practice papers that are available as well online. So please do look through the university website, look through the faculty websites, which should be able to signpost you and give you some good resources to look through in preparing your application or for your at-interview assessments. Now, in terms of the interview process, just to kind of give you an overview of what to expect at an interview, one of the first things I always advise candidates when preparing their application is to go onto the university YouTube channel. There's lots of good YouTube videos there which have been published, which provide a very good kind of overview and representation of what to expect when you come for an interview. As well as that, there are some videos that Downing College has put together on about interviews at Cambridge. So please do go and look at those videos as well, which will give you some good guidelines of what actually happens at the interview. But just to give you an idea, typically the interviews last for between 20 and 30 minutes. Usually, depending on the subject and the college, you may end up having 1 or 2 interviews on the same day. But the interviews will be conducted by academics, which are either at that college or associated with that college. And the content of the interviews will mainly be around academic discussion and subject-based focused discussions. So what to expect at an interview? There could be a number of things that could be explored. If you have submitted any written work as part of your application, the interviewer may want to pick up an essay that you've written and have a more detailed discussion with you about the essay you submitted. There may be something you've mentioned in your personal statement that the interviewer may pick up and want to have a more detailed discussion with you about that. They might actually present you with some text or some or an image and ask you to discuss, have a discussion around the text or the material that's been presented to you. But the whole idea really is to be able to present to you some information and see how you can analyze that information and come up with your own interpretation and understanding from that. Is really trying to engage you in an academic discussion and see how you can work through a problem that's been presented to you and reflect on it and give your opinions and views about this topic that you're discussing at the interview. The way to try and describe it, would be, it's like having a supervision, a one-to-one tutorial with an academic, where they're trying to explore a subject area or a concept with you and trying to see how you can piece through information to present about the problem that's been presented to you. So I'm coming to the end of my talk. Just to kind of wrap up, there's a number of frequently asked questions. One of these are about gap years. Can I actually have apply for a gap year before starting university? That's not a problem at all. A number of students do apply to university with deferred entry. And if you are planning to do a gap year, I would strongly recommend that you actually stipulate that on your application form. The other thing is about extenuating circumstances. If your work has been disrupted due to any kind of health issues or problems or due to a family bereavement, please do make sure you mention that in the additional questionnaire, and so that we understand about any extenuating circumstances that need to be taken into consideration. So I'm now at the end of my talk. There will be an opportunity for me to answer some questions with the panel at the Q&A session at the end.
Thank you all for attending this webinar. My name is Alessio Santoro, and I'm the Director of Studies for Philosophy at Downing. I'm going to present briefly an overview of the philosophy course at Cambridge, and this will give me an opportunity to highlight 3 reasons why I think you should consider applying at Cambridge if you're interested in studying philosophy. And finally, I'll say something about what I think I look for in applicants. So I'll start my presentation. So one could define philosophy as the study of problems that are ultimate and general. And that's why in the first year of the course, there's a variety of papers which covers quite broad topics. As you can see, we have Introduction to Metaphysics and Philosophy of Mind, Ethics and Political Philosophy, Philosophy of Language, and the set text paper that used to be called History of Philosophy. So that consists of 3 main texts: Plato's Meno, Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy, Mills on Liberty, and The Subjection of Women, and finally a logic paper. Now, as you can see, all these papers are compulsory. That's because the first year is taught on the assumption that no previous work has been done in philosophy. So that's meant to give you a solid foundations to the continuation of your studies. The situation changes though in the second year, where you do get to choose some of your papers. So if you have a look at what happens in second year, you can see that there are 2 papers which are compulsory. So knowledge, language, and world, paper 1, and the general paper, which is on broader topics, hence the name general paper. As you can see, there are other options, out of which you can choose 3. You have, for example, analytic philosophy, ethics, if you have a look at paper 5, early modern philosophy, and political philosophy. There are also options, which I called borrowed options, And you can see we have Greek and Roman philosophy, epistemology and metaphysics of science, and experimental psychology. That means, so what we mean by borrowed is that those courses are actually not offered by the Faculty of Philosophy itself. However, philosophy students do get the chance to take those papers, and that's because the papers are literally borrowed from other faculties. So Greek and Roman philosophy from classics, paper 6 from history and philosophy of science, and experimental psychology from psychology. This, I think, is an interesting feature of the course, because they gives you the opportunity to study topics which wouldn't necessarily be officially under the Faculty of Philosophy. What happens in the third year is that the number of optional paper increases. So we have, as I wrote, 4 papers plus 1 that we can choose. What I mean by this is that you do need to choose between paper 12, so the general paper again, and the dissertation, which is basically a very long essay of roughly 6,000 to 8,000 words. But other than that, you have a variety of papers, and you have to choose 4 that will just depend on your personal interest. So as you can see, there are 16 papers, and in this case as well, some of them are borrowed. So papers 14 to 16, for example, are borrowed from classics. Now, I think that 3 important aspects that you can see in the course are that, first of all, there's a lot of flexibility because of these optional papers, and thanks to the borrowed papers as well. So the variety of papers you can take is quite large, and I think this is definitely an advantage of studying at Cambridge. Another important aspect, which I think should be a strong reason for you to consider applying at Cambridge, is the special emphasis that the faculty lays on arguing, so on building solid arguments. And this is made in practice through the exercise of essay writing. This is quite important. You would be writing loads of essays at Cambridge, but it's really meant to be part of your training. So if you want to make sure that you understand philosophy, you surely have to work on your essay writing skills, and that's something you can do very well at Cambridge, thanks to the dissertation option, but also thanks to the supervision system. And this is actually the third and probably most important point to mention, I think, among the reasons why one should consider Cambridge, the supervision system. Now, in the case of philosophy, we're talking about mainly one-on-one supervisions. So these are really opportunities on a weekly basis to discuss in depth many different topics with experts in your field. And this really gives you an opportunity to do philosophy in practice. There's a wonderful chance every week to discuss properly and thoroughly philosophical problems with an expert. Now, something I'd like to mention is what I think I look for in applicants throughout the application process. I think something very important for me is to show genuine interest. You can tell when a candidate is driven by sincere curiosity, when they're motivated, when they're passionate about philosophy. And I think this is really something important, not just because it's nice, but because that guarantees a great experience for the student in question at Cambridge. If that's something we can offer, that's really any possible means to foster your curiosity and to help you develop your ideas. The second element I think I look for is, one might say, open-mindedness. What I mean by this is that it's important to be able to explore reasons for and against one and the same argument. So in this sense, I found myself suggesting during interviews or reminding interviewees that it's totally fine to change one's mind. That's really part of the process of thinking itself. So I think that for me, it's something very positive to realize that the person in front of me, for example, at interview, is ready and willing to reconsider his or her position and change their mind, or rather confirm what the view was, but after considering another argument. Finally, I think a very important element for me in an application, maybe the most important one, is independent critical thinking. Now, what I mean by this is that we do give a lot of importance to arguments in the faculty, of course. So I think that what I like to see is that the student has done quite a bit of thinking, that they want to discuss their ideas, that they're ready to put more options on the table, to change their mind about a specific idea. Basically, what I like to see in a candidate is that they ask themselves why, that they ask the others as well why. Basically, this attitude of questioning and being happy to integrate new knowledge into one's reasoning, this continues a process of asking why. So I think this is briefly what I had to say about philosophy. Now I'll hand over to Keith, who's going to talk about theology.
So theology, religion, and philosophy of religion. That's what the course is officially called. And we do abbreviate it to TRPR, but most people just find it easier to call it theology and to call our students theologians. But the full name perhaps helps me to make my first point, which is that this course explores an absolutely vast area. Thousands of years of thought from great civilizations around the world, grappling with the biggest questions of life and its meaning. And that connects potentially with absolutely everything that people have ever thought or done. So religious themes are woven deeply into our history and our understandings of ethics and politics. The whole history of Western philosophy involves a very lively conversation with theology over many centuries. Science emerges from a religious culture that believes that the whole universe is rational because it's structured by one divine mind. Great literature and art are often full of religious themes. And as we explore what it means today to build a better global society, a big part of that conversation is our various religious traditions and the ways that we've been shaped by them or that we've moved on from them. So the subject is potentially huge. And the Cambridge Theology course, I think, has more options in it from the very beginning than any other Cambridge course, and probably than most other theology courses elsewhere. There are no compulsory parts of the course, even at the very beginning. And so even as a first year, you might find you're doing a combination of topics which nobody else has chosen. So we'll look at this list in some more detail. Here's a list of the papers, the individual subjects that you can study, and you choose 5 of them in your first year. The italics on the left show the main areas that the course is divided into, and the titles on the right show what these specific first year papers are called. So first comes a set of scriptural languages, and everybody chooses one of those in their first year. And this highlights the fact that the Cambridge Theology course is at least partly very traditional. We've been teaching theology in Cambridge since the 13th century, and it's always been understood that it involves looking very closely at texts. So you learn an ancient language, one of the 4 which are used by Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. And this emphasis on looking very closely at texts is all about learning to see the world from someone else's perspective, as if we were inside someone else's head. Words and ideas in different languages don't map perfectly onto each other, and there are some things you can say very clearly in one language that are hard to say in another. So if you learn the language of another culture and ancient culture, it's offering you a very different way of seeing the world. And that helps to get inside a religious outlook on life. I'm going to be honest and say that this is the part of the course which intimidates people the most and puts off applicants the most. I'm not going to attempt to hide that. But we are well equipped here to coax nervous students through this challenging task. We have plenty of students who come here with hardly any confidence in learning languages, and we put them in a group with people at the same level, and we help them to succeed. So after the languages at the top of the list, then we get to papers on the Old and New Testaments, the Jewish and Christian scriptures. Everyone studies one of those two papers in their first year. So there's a paper on King David and a paper on Jesus and the Gospels. And here the approach is very much a historical one. Who wrote these texts and why? Well, what did these ideas mean to the communities which first believed them? How can we understand them in their context? And again, there's that emphasis on looking closely at texts as the traditional foundation of the course. So by now you've chosen a language and you've chosen an Old Testament or a New Testament paper, but after that, everything is wide open and you've got a free choice of 3 more papers from the rest of the list. So onto church history and the wonderfully named Christianity and the Transformation of Culture. This particular paper homes in on the 4th and 5th centuries, looking at what happened as the Roman Empire adopted Christianity. And that opens up lots of big questions about religion and politics, church and state, and how faith interacts with the society in which it's set. Moving on then to Christian theology, and that means looking closely at the big ideas at the heart of the Christian faith and how they work. What do Christians mean by God and creation and good and evil and the Trinity? This is where you get to ask the searching questions about whether or not these ideas actually work, and to see how different thinkers, Protestant and Catholic, ancient and modern, have grappled with them from different perspectives. Again, quite a lot of looking closely at some really significant texts. Now, what I've covered so far is mostly like the sort of traditional theology degree that someone might have done in Cambridge a century ago. But as we go further down the list, we get onto the topics which are called religious studies, the next part in the name of the course. And that might be a completely different degree course in some other universities. So first, a paper taking a social sciences approach to understanding contemporary religion. Here you can learn the skills used by sociologists and anthropologists and explore how religion functions in society in today's world, including things to do with secularization, politics, sexuality, and how different cultures approach a sense of the sacred. And then the next paper opens up the study of 4 more of the great world religions: Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism, looking at their central teachings and beliefs and how they function in the world today. Then finally, I get to the end of the long title of the course, the philosophy of religion. So this paper explores the great Western tradition of philosophy from the ancient Greeks to the present, looking deeply at the nature of truth and knowledge, what it means for things to exist, more about the problem of evil, and looking closely at the big questions that philosophers and theologians have argued about. Last of all, then, a paper on ethics, which again is understood to be part of that philosophical approach. What do we mean by the good? How can we work out what it is? And again, perspectives from great thinkers from the ancient Greeks to the present day. So a huge range of choices, and you can only cover some of them. And my job as a director of studies involves helping students to explore their own interests and to find their way through these choices. Now, each of these areas listed in italics starts off a strand of studies, which then continues through the remaining years. So we'll look next more briefly at what that means in the second year. But first, I should say that if you take this first year paper on the social sciences and you find you really love that approach, there's a way of doing much more of that sort of thing in the second year. You can switch in the second year to a combined course, a joint track, which we share with the Human, Social and Political Sciences course called Modern Religion. So if I go on to my next slide, I haven't listed that there, but if you choose that joint track with Human, Social and Political Sciences, then you spend half of your time on that and half of your time on the theology options that I've listed here. Otherwise, if you stay with the pure theology, then it's a case of doing 4 or 5 of the papers listed here. And this year you have a completely wide open choice. So there's more study of language if you want it. That's optional now. If you're really keen, you can start a second language from scratch. Further papers on the Old Testament, 2 of those now, and 2 on the New Testament. So if any of these particular areas grabs your attention in the first year, you can choose to do both areas. but both papers in that area in the second. And you can do either 1 or 2 papers for church history also. And there's a closer look at some of the greatest Christian theologians, ancient and modern, for those enjoying the Christian theology approach. Then religious studies expands and splits into 3 individual papers on Judaism, Islam, and Hinduism and Buddhism. So again, you can go deeper into any of those interests. And 2 philosophy papers this year, including one shared with the main philosophy course, and then a paper as well on ethics and faith. And one of our most popular papers, Theology and Literature, looking at novels and religious themes in literature. Great if you enjoyed English literature at school. Then on to the final year, and the text is getting smaller. I won't say much about this. You'll see it's a very long list. So each of those areas of study is branching out further. And in the third year, instead of being in a very crowded lecture room, you might find yourself in a group of 5 or 6 students working with a professor who's talking about their research and the book that they're writing. And this can be tremendously exciting. There's also the possibility of doing a dissertation if you want to, so that you can have your own research project to finish your degree. So that's the course and the vast area that it tries to explore. Why should someone choose to study theology at Cambridge? Well, that vast course gives you lots of freedom, and so people choose it for many different reasons. I guess about half of our students come from some kind of a religious background and were taught of faith as children. In many cases, they're wanting to explore it more deeply, or they're questioning it, or they're wanting to see how it fits in with other ideas and faiths and perspectives. The other half, roughly, would be atheists or agnostics, people with their own questions and ideas about life and its meaning, those who find religious ideas fascinating, even if they're skeptical about them. And my former students have gone on to do lots of different things. None have actually become vicars or religious studies teachers, which is what people from other subjects tend to assume that all theologians do. But they've included an army officer, some lawyers, accountants, management consultants, and people working for a theatre and a recruitment company, a whole range of different careers. So what are we looking for in potential applicants? Above all, I think, signs of genuine interest in some of the main areas of the course. So we'd like to see signs that you've done more than just listen to your teachers. Perhaps you visited different places of worship in your local area or on holiday. Perhaps you've taken a look at the scriptures of different faiths. Perhaps you found a religious author who fascinated you, and you've read 1 or 2 of their books and thought about them for yourself. If you can mention on your personal statement some of the ways in which you've begun to explore different religious ideas yourself, that would be very helpful. One thing we're looking for is that you do need to be somebody who enjoys looking closely at texts. You won't enjoy the course otherwise, really. It's not made of video clips and field trips. That process of looking hard at something written down in another time and another culture and trying to get inside the heads of the people who wrote it, you need to be someone who can spend an afternoon in a library doing that and who will enjoy the experience. That's not for everyone, but if you like that sort of thing, then there's no better place to do it than Cambridge.
So yeah, philosophy at Downing. I'm a 3rd-year student studying philosophy here, and I'm just going to talk for a bit about what it's like studying philosophy specifically at Downing and at Cambridge more widely. Yeah, so there's very few philosophy students at Downing, which actually is really nice because it means we all know each other very well. There's like 4 or 5 of us here. It's a very nice sense of community. I personally have always had brilliant experiences with my directors of studies. I've actually had 3 different directors of studies in the 3 years I've been here. Although I like to think I'm not the common denominator in that factor, but every one of them has just been absolutely lovely. It's a really, really beautiful college, as I'm sure you know. You've seen pictures of it online and stuff. Yeah, here are some photos that my friend Jan took. Thanks, Jan. It's just stunning. Like, I remember the first time I got here, I was just in awe, gobsmacked. It is beautiful. Why choose philosophy? Well, personally, yeah, it was a bit of a fluke for me. I, in year 12, was taking biology A-level for some reason, and like 6 weeks into the course, I couldn't hack it. It wasn't for me. So I went to my teachers. I said, I cannot do this anymore. They said, you can't drop it. You've got to switch to something. I was like, all right. I quite liked essays. I was already taking English literature, so I just chose philosophy because I thought it sounded interesting. Pretty much immediately fell in love with it. Like the first lesson I went to, we were talking about Plato's cave allegory, and I was just like, this is it, this is brilliant. So yeah, for me it was luck, but Why should you choose philosophy? Well, it really improves your critical thinking skills, encourages you to think deeply about things that you might previously have just taken for granted, which I think is a really important skill. Philosophy, like the term, just covers a massive range of areas. So there really is something for everyone. Like there's philosophy of art and music, philosophy of science, philosophy of medicine, philosophy of language. Like there is just everything. So there's something for everyone. And it's also really, really relevant. It's not just, you know, Plato and Aristotle and all the ancient guys. It's here is just a random list of things that I personally find interesting that are also really contemporary. So animal ethics, environmental ethics and justice, ethics of artificial intelligence, questions of justice to do with sort of post-globalization world, and video game aesthetics, which I read a really interesting essay on the other week. It's fascinating. Quick course overview, because Alessio has actually covered most of it, all of it. These are, I've put the ones in square brackets, the ones that I haven't taken, and the ones out of square brackets are what I did take. So yeah, these are the ones I've got personal experience with. As you can see, later in my like second and third years, I've sort of stayed away from the science, mathsy, logic side of things, and I've stayed with ethics, political philosophy, and aesthetics. And I'm also writing a dissertation this year about philosophy of music and sort of how it intersects with ethics. What are supervisions? So yeah, in philosophy, I have 1 hour supervision per week, and it's 4 supervisions per paper. So you usually have like 4 papers you're supervised on, and they split them up. So half a term spent on this paper, half a term spent on the other paper. And you write an essay for that supervision once a week, varying lengths. I think they get longer and longer. So right now I'm at about 2,000 words per essay. So it is very manageable. Yeah, and then in the supervision, you've handed in your essay the day before. The supervision's a chance to get feedback on it, discuss the essay, and discuss the topic you've written on much more generally. Your supervisor might be a PhD student, they might be a research fellow, or they could be just other members of the faculty, it could be anyone. And yeah, just most importantly, it's a chance to ask questions, make sure you've understood everything in the topic, and just have really interesting discussions with experts in the field. So we're very, very lucky. Here's just a quick glance at what kind of work I do. So this is the essay I handed in this week. Do we have a duty to preserve the ecosystem? If so, why? This one was from first year. Unless we can truly change the future, then both free will and moral responsibility are impossible. Discuss. That was for the metaphysics paper, I think. This one was also from this year. Brilliant but ethically flawed artworks can be brilliant because of their ethical flaws. Discuss. Yeah, that was part of the aesthetics paper. Is knowledge analyzable? If so, if not, how should it be understood? That was from second year, from the compulsory paper. And here's a glimpse of the formal methods paper from first year. Don't look too closely at that though, because I'm not sure if it's all right. I was never very good at logic, but that's kind of the sort of stuff we'd be doing. Support available in college. So you've got your director of studies, also known as your DOS. It took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out what people meant when they said DOS. So there you go. They oversee your academic life and your studies. You've got your tutor, who's there for more welfare related stuff. College families, which I'll briefly explain, but leave the bulk of it to Tillie. So basically when you arrive in Freshers Week, you're kind of assigned college parents in the year above, and you'll have college siblings as well in your year. And they're sort of like, they'll show you around college, they'll show you around Cambridge, they'll answer any questions you have. You'll spend a day together, usually in Freshers Week, called Family Day. Yeah, it's just nice having someone in the older years to kind of show you around. Within Downing, there's also counsellors and college nurse if you need so, and the JCR, which, for lack of a better explanation, is sort of like school council, but for Downing. So it's like a student body. Each person in the JCR has a different role. And if you want to like make any sort of structural change to college and things like that, the JCR is a port of call there. Life at Downing. Yeah, I think it's a really good size because it's not too big, it's not too overwhelming. and most people in your year and the other years do know each other, so it's really nice. There's a cafe, which is a cafe in the day, and then it turns into a bar at night, where you can go and hang out with your mates. There's a library with like massive tables or individual desks with those, like, you know, blinker things if you really want to focus. There's a picture of it. There's the hall where you can buy food, and that's also where formals take place. And again, I'll just give a really brief explanation of that because I think Tillie will go into more depth. Formals are basically like fancy meals where you dress up and, like, yeah, you just go have a meal for an hour and a half. Yeah, that's a photo of what formal looks like. And the paddock when it's sunny is really, really beautiful. Oh yeah, and this is a picture of the cat that lives near my house this year. She's lovely, but she doesn't like us very much, as I think you can tell from that picture. We haven't managed to tame her yet. Societies. There are loads of societies at Cambridge. I could not begin to sum up. There are just hundreds. Some of them are specific to your college and others span across the university. These are a few that I personally have experience in. So Downing Jazz Band, Blake Society, which is humanities, Philliminality, which is the Philosophy Society at Downing, Cujo, which is Cambridge University Jazz Orchestra, and Varsity, which is like the student newspaper. Oh yeah, that was from a gig, I think last term at the Union, which was really exciting. And then there's also all these Whitby, Danby, Choir, etc., etc. There are loads. These are all Downing specific ones, but whatever you're interested in, there is most likely a society for it. It's crazy. And although these aren't societies, if there are LGBT plus and BAME groups both within Downing and those that span uni-wide, which are there for support and social events and stuff like that. Some preconceptions about Cambridge that I had and that have been dispelled now I've been here for a few years. I think this is a pretty common one. I thought everyone would just like lock themselves in their room or in the library 24/7 and take themselves really seriously all the time. This is not true. I can see why people think this, but it's not true. You do have a social life. You're not just locked in the library till 3 a.m. Yeah. 8-week terms are too short. Yeah, I thought 8 weeks. I was like, I don't want to like be at home for ages when all my other mates who are at like Bristol and Leeds or whatever are still at university. I was like, I'm going to be bored. 8 weeks is too short. It's not. I could not do more than 8 weeks. The 8-week terms are short, but they are packed and they fly by really fast. So any more than 8 weeks would be very difficult. By 8 weeks, you're ready to go home and sleep. Trust me, that is true. Worries about falling behind on work or finding it too difficult. Again, I think this is a pretty common one because it's quite intimidating, isn't it? Like coming here and having like the Cambridge name and stuff like that. But I think the support systems are really good. And also for philosophy specifically, because the year is so small, there's only about 40 of us. And we all know each other. It's like a little family. It's really nice. So if you do have, if there's something you don't understand, you can just ask one of your classmates. Everyone is really, really willing to help out. Everyone is lovely. So that has not been a problem. There's obviously stuff that I find incredibly difficult, but that's all right. That's what we're here for. And there's no shame in asking questions at all. Oh yeah, this is a bit of a weird one. Punting. I thought that I would be expected to go punting like every weekend, which I was not happy about because I really don't like water and I don't swim well. That's okay. I think this was just me being stupid, but that's not the case. I've only been a few times in my whole time here. It's not a common thing. We don't go punting every weekend. It's all right. There's a picture of me looking very scared in a punt. Yeah, I think that's all from me.
Hi, my name's Tillie and I'm currently in my first year studying theology at Downing, and I'm just going to be talking to you all a bit today about what it's like. So I had a lot of worries before coming to Cambridge. I think there's a lot of misconceptions people generally have. So workload is quite a big one. I think people, as Jay said, people think you're just going to be working 24/7 and not have any time to sort of relax or enjoy yourself. Also friends, I was really worried about making friends, and whether I would have people to sort of hang out with when I wasn't studying. A really big one for me was also, would I fit in? I came from a state school and I was really worried that I would have no idea what was going on, sort of with all the Cambridge terminology and the traditions, and that I wouldn't understand people, or sort of get along with other people in college. Being on a small course, theology is also a small course. There's about 40 of us, and I wasn't planning on having a lot of course mates in college, which sort of some of the bigger subjects do have. So I was worried maybe I wouldn't have people to sort of talk about my subject with as much. And then finally, just more general things, living on my own, having to cook for myself, manage my own finances. Those were all things that I was quite worried about as well. So what was it actually like when I arrived? So I was completely wrong about most of that. And when I arrived, there was a great Freshers Week. And this was a really good opportunity to get to know some other people, and I became really good friends with a lot of my housemates. And I'd now say they're some of my closest friends. So that was amazing. And all the freshers reps, who are the people who sort of welcome you, were really supportive as well. In terms of workload, the academic staff are really supportive at Downing, and Keith, who's my Director of Studies, was also amazing in making sure that I didn't feel overwhelmed with the amount of work, and that I always had lots of resources to help me. Friends, as I said, I did make friends. You will make friends. It's everyone's in the same position. So it also helped that I was doing an interesting course that I really enjoyed. So that also took a lot of the pressure off of work and studying. And then, as Jay mentioned a bit, there is a really fantastic college community at Downing, and particularly college families. So as he mentioned, that's basically 2 second year students who are assigned to be your college parents. And they basically get in touch with you before you arrive at Downing. So if you have any questions you want to ask them, you can do that. They'll sort of tell you how things work, and then when you actually arrive, they will sort of show you around, and they'll usually, if possible, be one of them at least will be from your subject. So that's really helpful because they'll usually sort of give you some tips for academic stuff. So why did I choose Downing? Basically, I came to an open day and I loved it. It's got a great location. It's a central college, but it's not so in the centre of Cambridge that there's loads of tourists and that it feels quite crowded and busy. And it's right next to loads of restaurants, shops and supermarkets. Most students live on site, which is really nice for creating like a feeling of community. The grounds are beautiful. Downing is literally so pretty. And if you get the chance to visit, or if you have visited, it's just amazing. The accommodation is great as well. All of Downing's kitchens have an oven and a freezer, which, speaking to my friends from other colleges, that's very, very rare. So I think everyone is quite jealous of the fact that we have such great kitchen facilities. Downing is a really friendly college as well. The people, the students are so nice, and all the staff as well. And as I mentioned, college families are great. So why did I choose to study theology? Basically, I was always really interested in knowing how things work, particularly sort of society, and religion is a really big part of this. And theology just studies so many different topics all under one degree. So you can study sort of historical topics, classics, politics, social anthropology, lots of different things. There's also a variety of career choices once you've graduated, and skills like critical thinking and constructing persuasive arguments are really sort of attractive for employers once you have graduated. And why specifically at Cambridge? So Cambridge has a really small theology cohort. So it means you get to know your course mates and your lecturers quite well, which is really nice. Because if you ever need help, you've always got someone you can ask. And I found particularly this year, it's been really good because a lot of stuff has been online. So we've shared sort of our ideas and any resources that we've been using, which has been really helpful. This is a picture of the faculty on the screen, and the faculty is really nice. It has a great library and other facilities, so you can sort of get the resources you need for essays from there. And there's also a really good flexibility in papers, which Keith talked about, and it's really great because you can choose, which is something quite special, I think, about Cambridge. So Keith already talked about this, but these are the first year papers. I've highlighted the ones I'm doing in yellow. So I'm also doing New Testament Greek as my scriptural language, and then the ones in green are sort of like the compulsory ones, but they're not compulsory in the sense that you have a choice sort of within the topic. So yeah, that's just a brief overview. I've got a typical week for me here. Sorry, it's not very well put together, but there's sort of different parts of my week. So I have lectures, which are sort of less interactive, more taking notes. And then you'll also usually have seminars or classes for your papers, which will usually involve some sort of reading or preparation beforehand. And then when you're actually in the class, you sort of have a chat about the material with the lecturer. And then I also have language classes, which you can see on the timetable. You usually have those about 3 to 4 times a week. I have 3 classes a week, and then also supervisions. And the blank spaces on this timetable for me would usually be filled with either doing reading for seminars, catching up on lecture work, doing reading for essays, or translation exercises for Greek. So yeah, you kind of have to manage your time and fit everything in around your other commitments. So a bit about supervisions. So supervisions, or as they're called, supos, they happen once or twice a week usually, and most of mine I've had once a week. And in preparation for supervision, you are given an essay title, which is based off lecture material, and then you'll have I usually have about 6 or 7 days, so roughly a week, to read, plan and write my essay. It doesn't sound like very long, but you really quickly get used to sort of writing them effectively and well. You then send your essay in to your supervisor, and during the supervision you have a discussion about your essay. They'll sometimes give you some constructive criticism on how you can improve your writing style, which is really, really useful. And yeah, I think this is something really great as well about Cambridge, that you have the opportunity to discuss something you're really interested in with an expert in the field. So supervisions are a really great opportunity, and I think one of the best things about theology at Cambridge. So outside of studying, so contrary to popular belief, Cambridge students don't spend all their time studying. We do have time for a social life. So as Jay mentioned, there are formals. I think this year we had some online formals, which was quite fun. There's also opportunities to go to the college bar or the taverna, which is an outdoor seating area, or hall, which are really nice places to sort of catch up with your friends after you've been doing, after you've had a long day. It's just really good to have a chat to people. Cambridge is a really beautiful city, and there are loads of really nice walks you can go on. I did this a lot last term with my friends, and we got to see some really nice places that are sort of less visited by tourists, so that was great. Then very close to Downing, there are loads of restaurants and cafes. This is really good because you can go for a meal or a drink with your friends, or if anyone comes to visit you. And then there's also university-wide celebrations and events. So an example of this would be May balls, which I think are quite well known, but they're basically parties that happen at the end of the academic year that are run by colleges. So colleges will usually have one either every year or every other year. So Downing does have one, and they're basically just a nice thing you can buy tickets to and relax again with your friends after a year of work. And there are also a lot of societies, as Jay said. Cambridge has over 800 societies, so if you're interested in something specific, there will definitely be some kind of society for you to join, and if there isn't, there is nothing to stop you from starting one yourself. Different colleges also have their own societies, so Downing particularly has a dramatic society, a music society, and the Blake Society, which is for humanities. And Downing also has its own theatre, which is really nice. So if you're interested in any kind of drama or acting, then that is great for you. There's also sports. There's both university-wide sports and college sports. So last term I had to go at rowing and with Downing boat club, and Downing is amazing again because it has its own boathouse and rowing tank, so that was really fun. And I also had to go at lacrosse, which is something I never thought I would be doing, but was also really enjoyable. And then finally, there's also charity work you can get involved with, and that's generally through the wider university. And that's definitely something that I'm looking forward to having a go at next term. And then to finish off, generally, am I glad that I decided to apply to Cambridge and specifically Downing? Definitely. I think it's really normal to be nervous about going to university and applying because it's a big change. But if you are nervous, then you should try not to worry because there's lots of support out there. And if you never apply, then you might miss out on a really great opportunity for yourself. So basically the takeaway here is that we would all really just encourage you to apply because you never know what might happen. So yeah, I'm going to stop screen sharing now and hand back over.
I see one of the participants has put a question on the chat which says, how many colleges can you apply for? Just to kind of answer that one, Cambridge is made up of 31 colleges, but depending on which college offers philosophy and theology, it can vary. So it's important to look on the college website to make sure that the college that you're thinking of applying to does offer theology and philosophy as a subject for admissions. Not all colleges offer all the subjects that university teaches and offers, the courses that they're offered at the university. So it's really important to make sure that you apply to the college which has the subject that you're interested in. Downing, for example, offers all the courses which the university teaches, but that isn't the case for every college.
Brilliant, thank you, I'd missed that one. There's a question here for you, Keith. Are the languages compulsory for all 3 years of the theology course?
No, so it's just for the first year, and probably a little under half the people then decide to carry on for the second and third years, or if they're extremely keen to start a second language. But yeah, you just have to do it in the first year. That's only when it's compulsory. Shall I take the next one as well?
Yes, you can do.
Does the continuation of a scriptural language or beginning a new one use up one of the spaces for optional papers? So in the second and third years, you do 4 or 5 papers. Most people do 4. And so if you do a language, that's one of those. And if you don't do a language, then that does free up another space to do something else. Yeah.
Brilliant, thanks, Keith. So we've got a good question here that I think we'll ask Alessio first and then Keith. So how would you say the best way of deciding between theology and philosophy if you've got an interest in both?
Very good question. I think you can have a look at the variety of papers offered in first year, and then have a look at the topics and see whether either is more appealing based on what you would literally be studying. Yeah, that's one basic tip.
Yes. What can I say? Obviously, I think everyone should do theology. Well, maybe not quite. I mean, let me say the philosophy course has this reputation for its love of analytical, very logical philosophy. And Jay was talking about perhaps moving away from that during the course. So obviously, you don't have to spend all of your time doing that. But there was that rather scary-looking diagram that looked like advanced algebra. And to be a philosopher, you need a bit of an aptitude for that sort of thing. If you're a theologian, you're more likely from the beginning to be immersing yourself in texts, in things that different cultures have written. There's less of the sort of really logical, is this true or not kind of thing, and a bit more of the more kind of sympathetic, how can we see this from different perspectives kind of thing. But it's not all woolly thinking like that. I mean, there are the philosophical papers and the more analytical theological papers where you do have the really fierce arguments about this makes no sense, this person's obviously wrong, and so on. So yes, there are large overlaps, but yeah, I'd advise you just to look at the prospectuses and look at the paper descriptions. You can read all the details of each paper on the Divinity website for theology. I'm sure you can for philosophy. But you know, in Cambridge, you can actually change course. So if you pick one and you realise it's not for you, then you can switch to the other one after a year or two.
Brilliant, thank you both. A question here for the students. Jay, will come to you first and then over to Tillie. Do you have an idea of what job you would like to have in the future, and what kind of careers? Any thoughts?
I mean, I'm hopefully going to go and do a master's next year, so that's the immediate plan. After that, this is kind of a bit out there, but there's a place in Cambridge called Centre for the Study of Existential Risk, where you can go and study things like climate change, ethics of AI, things like that, and study the sort of whether they pose an existential risk to humankind. So I think it's a pretty neglected area of research, so it's very ethically good to go and do. So probably something like that, something in the climate research area, but this is not set in stone.
Tillie, any thoughts? I know you're only in first year, but
Yeah, good question. Making me think about it myself, actually. I would probably say I really don't have any like set in stone ideas, but one possibility is maybe going into some kind of law, some sort of legal sort of area, because theology and philosophy are both really good at teaching you how to argue, basically, and argue persuasively. So I think maybe that is definitely an area where you would be using your skills well. So possibly something to do with that, but definitely not set on anything just yet.
that's fine. Brilliant, thank you. Cam, a question for you. Do you have the kind of typical number of applicants we have for philosophy and then for theology, and how many offers? And if you need to look it up, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I could give the top of my head. So this year for philosophy, we actually had quite a high number of applicants. I think we had around 16. Alessio, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was right. And theology, again, we had a record number of applicants. We had quite a high number of applicants. I think it was in the order of just below 10. Was that right, Keith?
We had 7.
7, yes, yeah. And typically, we try and subjects which are quite small subject areas, we try and make sure we can make 2 offers for that subject. So there are students which are coming through which can then be paired up in supervisions together. But it depends, year in year it can vary, but Downing typically looks to make 1 or 2 offers for philosophy and theology each year. But again, it really depends on the gathered field that's applied to the college across a range of subjects that's applied. So, but that hopefully gives them a rough idea of what the numbers look like at Downing.
Brilliant, thank you. And could you talk a little bit about kind of the value of doing an EPQ for?
Okay, so I mean, Keith, Alessio, feel free to add anything to this. EPQs are really useful things to do. I definitely encourage students to think about doing an EPQ. What that's really doing is allowing you to explore your subject in a more broader context and applying what you're learning so far at school in a different context as well. Does it count towards your offer conditions? No, a lot of students ask, does an EPQ count towards a grade that can be used for the offer conditions? Unfortunately not. We use A levels as our entry requirements and offer conditions. So, but definitely do an EPQ. It's useful to do. It helps to reinforce your understanding about the subject, and also gives you an opportunity to use some of the things that you're doing in EPQ to talk about in your personal statement. So yeah, that's what I would say about EPQs. Don't know, is there anything, Keith, Alessio, you would like to add to that?
Not really. I mean, it's not something that we'd necessarily look for, but it's one of a range of things that can show your interest in the subject and give us some evidence of that. So yeah, a good opportunity, perhaps, if you've got it.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Question for the students. Jay, we'll come to you first again. What sort of topics did you write about in your personal statement, and sort of any super curricular activities that you included or suggestions that you have?
I don't feel hugely qualified to give any suggestions, and I don't think I went down the route of writing about particular books that I'd read or particular articles or anything like that. It was more general. It was more like, I'm interested in this part of ethics and this and that, rather than specific books or papers. And I do remember I also wrote a bit about my interest in jazz, like just all the music stuff that I do. So that did go on there, I remember.
I'm trying to remember. I think I talked quite generally about the areas I was interested in, and then I linked it to some of the reading I'd done. I would definitely say I probably went a bit over the top with the reading, or like, I think there's probably a bit too much, a few too many books I mentioned possibly. But yeah, I tried to focus sort of on the general area and then link it to any reading I'd done, just to show sort of why I was interested in it and how it linked to other topics within sort of the study. And in terms of super curriculars, I just had a few things at the end about like volunteering I'd done, like very general, nothing really subject related. So yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you both. So a question here, which I think is quite a good one. Is personal religious belief or lack thereof a factor that is considered when selecting applicants? And then how would you recommend expressing interest as an applicant without following a religious lifestyle? I assume this is coming to Keith.
Yes, that's a very good question. I mean, it's not a factor in the sense that we're not looking for it or the lack of it. We're looking for how you think about things. We're looking for the quality of your intellect and your ability to deal with different ways of looking at things and to argue for and against ideas. So we would be interested in your motivation for pursuing the subject. So that could be that you've been brought up in a particular religious background and you want to look beyond that or know more about the background to it, or see other religious perspectives. It could be that you don't have any kind of religious background and that you're interested in it sort of from the outside because you feel that's something you haven't experienced too much of. So I mean, there could be a whole range of personal motivations for doing the subject, and really what we're looking for is some sign of interest and aptitude for quite careful thinking. And it's also entirely appropriate if you want to keep all of that in terms of your own beliefs entirely to yourself. So you don't have to declare a religious position on a personal statement. You can simply talk about some things you found interesting. So yeah, I find some students are very upfront about that, and others don't really talk about it at all. And maybe I find out a bit more about what they themselves think as the course goes on. But yes, we have a whole range of different backgrounds of people on the course.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And we are almost out of time, so I think it would be nice just to hear from everyone a sort of final piece of advice for the students who might still be a little bit unsure about applying to philosophy or theology. And if we could go in the order that we presented. So we'll start with you, Cam.
My advice, this is why I always say to applicants, really research the subject you want to study at university. Like I said, there's a number of courses on offer at the university which cover a broad range of subject areas. So think about what you want to study and really make sure that it's the right choice you're making. You're going to spend 3 years of your life at university, or even 4. So you want to do something you're going to enjoy.
I'd say that if you're really passionate about philosophy, that's really, Cambridge is really the place for you. That gives you plenty of possibilities to explore the topic in any possible direction, and you'll be just amazed to see how much you can learn by just exchanging ideas with as many people as possible. So once you think that you would like to do philosophy, Cambridge is really the place to do that.
Yeah, I would just say take some time to explore your interests at this stage. Sometimes people ask if there's some particular book or set of books that they should prove that they've read, and that's really not the case. The subject is so vast. So whatever your way into an interest in theology and religion is, then follow that up and spend some time exploring it, and then that gives us something to talk to you about when you come for interview.
Yeah, just following on from Alessio, really, in terms of the application process and stuff, I think just make sure your passion for philosophy really comes through. That's my advice.
I think my advice would be try not to worry too much about it, in the sense of I spent a lot of the application process like worrying about whether I'd done this right, or especially after the interview. And I think just have faith sort of in your academic abilities and apply anyway, because you never know what might happen. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you all, and thank you all for your time this afternoon and for your presentations. It's been a brilliant session, and thank you to you at home for joining. If we haven't got to your question, please do email me and I'll make sure I pass it to the right person and get a response for you. When you leave the webinar today, it will redirect you to a feedback form. Please do fill this in and let us know how you found the webinar. But have a brilliant rest of your day.